The sound of my wife's laughter drifting down from our home office should have been music to my ears. Instead, it felt like nails on a chalkboard as I lay under my broken-down GMC in the garage, wrestling with a stubborn oil pan bolt. "Let's talk about how my boyfriend needs therapy," Tara's voice carried through the air vents, crystal clear. "Oh, and why some men are just impotent. Stay tuned, ladies." More laughter. Sharp, cutting, designed to wound. I dropped my wrench, the metallic clang echoing in the sudden silence of my world crashing down. "My name is Grant Ellis. I'm 35 years old. I own a successful physical therapy clinic in suburban Dallas. And apparently, my wife of 12 years just called me impotent on her podcast. To 50,000 subscribers." I slid out from under the truck, my work shirt now decorated with motor oil and the bitter taste of humiliation. Tara Blake, she kept her maiden name for her brand, had been hosting Real Talk with Tara for 3 years. What started as mommy blogging had evolved into a lifestyle podcast where she dispensed relationship advice to desperate housewives across America. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Grant, honey, can you keep it down?" her voice called from upstairs. "We're recording." I stood there in my own garage, covered in grease, being shushed like a child while my wife publicly emasculated me for profit. The last 6 months suddenly made perfect sense. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way she flinched when I touched her. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. "Heard Tara's show? You okay, son?" Jesus. Even my 70-year-old father listened to her podcast. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time, my work boots heavy on the hardwood. The office door was cracked open, and I could see Tara's perfectly curated setup: ring lights, professional microphone, motivational posters about living your truth. "So, Becca," Tara was saying to her co-host and best friend Becca Lane, "what do you do when your partner can't perform?" Becca's laugh was even sharper than Tara's. "Well, sometimes you have to find your satisfaction elsewhere, if you know what I mean." "Oh, I know exactly what you mean," Tara replied, and I could hear the smirk in her voice. I pushed the door open. Both women looked up, startled. Tara's face went pale beneath her Instagram-perfect makeup. "Grant, we're recording. I heard." I kept my voice level, even though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "Interesting topic choice." Becca, ever the instigator, didn't miss a beat. "We're discussing relationship challenges. Very common stuff." "Right." I looked directly at Tara. "And how's your research going?" The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Tara's green eyes, the same ones I'd fallen in love with in college, now looked at me like I was something she'd stepped in. "We'll talk later," she said finally. "Yeah," I replied, backing out of the room. "We will." I spent the rest of the evening in my workshop, pretending to organize tools while my mind raced. Our daughters, Emma and Sophie, 8 and 10 respectively, were at my parents' house for the weekend. Thank God they weren't here for this. Around midnight, I heard Tara's heels clicking down the hallway to our bedroom. I waited another hour before creeping upstairs. She was asleep, her phone charging on the nightstand. I'd never violated her privacy before, never had a reason to. The phone was unlocked. She trusted me that much, at least. I opened her messages and immediately wished I hadn't. Liam Torres was the most recent conversation. "Liam, listening to your show. You're so bad, Tara. Just telling the truth. He has no idea." Liam, "When can I see you again? I need you." Tara, "Tomorrow, same place. And Liam, wear the blue shirt. You know what it does to me." I scrolled up. Weeks of messages, explicit photos, hotel receipts. A complete alternate reality where my wife was someone I didn't recognize. Liam Torres. I knew that name. Personal trainer at CrossFit downtown. We'd met him at a neighborhood barbecue last summer. Cocky guy, all muscles and smirk. He'd made some comment about Tara's form that had rubbed me wrong. Now I knew why. I took screenshots of everything, my hands shaking with rage and adrenaline. Then I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it and went downstairs to think. The podcast episode was already live on all platforms. I pulled it up on my laptop and listened to the whole thing, each word a fresh knife twist. Tara and Becca spent 45 minutes discussing male inadequacy with the kind of clinical detachment usually reserved for discussing the weather. Sometimes, Tara said near the end, you realize you've outgrown your partner, that you deserve better, that you deserve someone who can actually satisfy you. Amen, sister, Becca replied. Life's too short for bad closeness and fragile egos. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, processing the complete destruction of my marriage. Then I opened it again and did something I'd never done before. I left a comment, using my real name. Solid fiction, Tara. Want proof? I woke up to the sound of Tara's phone exploding with notifications. She was in the kitchen, coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips, staring at her screen with the expression of someone watching their house burn down. Grant, she said without looking up. We need to talk. Good morning to you too, sweetheart. I poured my own coffee, noting how my hands were perfectly steady now. Funny how clarity could calm the nerves. What did you do? I sat across from her at our kitchen island, the same spot where we'd shared thousands of meals, made plans, discussed our dreams. Now it felt like a negotiating table. I listened to your show, I said. Very enlightening. Her face flushed red. You had no right to comment. Do you know what you've done? Exercised my First Amendment rights? You've humiliated me. She slammed the phone down. My followers are asking questions. My sponsors are concerned. Becca's been fielding calls all morning. I pulled out my own phone and opened the podcast app. Tara's latest episode had over 3,000 comments, and mine was pinned at the top with hundreds of replies. Looks like people are interested in the truth, I said. The truth? Tara's voice cracked. What truth? I slid my phone across the counter, showing her the screenshots of her messages with Liam. She went white. Grant, Save it. I stood up, suddenly exhausted. I have to get to work. Some of us still have jobs that don't involve destroying our families for content. The drive to my clinic was surreal. I'd been running Ellis physical therapy for 8 years, building it from a one-room operation into a thriving practice with 12 employees. I'd always been proud of what I'd accomplished, but now everything felt hollow. My receptionist, Maria, looked up when I walked in. Dr. Ellis, are you okay? You look like my wife just publicly castrated me on the internet? I managed a smile. Yeah, I'm having a morning. Word travels fast in a small community. By lunch, 3 patients had mentioned Tara's podcast. Mrs. Henderson, a 70-year-old with chronic back pain, was particularly direct. Heard your wife's show yesterday, she said, while I worked on her lower spine. That girl's got some nerve talking about personal business like that. It's complicated, Mrs. Henderson. Complicated, my foot. A woman doesn't air her dirty laundry unless she's trying to justify something. You need a good lawyer, honey. I was adjusting her vertebrae when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Liam. We need to talk. I showed Mrs. Henderson out and called the number back. He answered on the first ring. Grant, look, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, I said, is thinking you could screw my wife without consequences. It's not what you think. Really? Because I think you're a narcissistic piece of garbage who gets off on destroying families. Am I close? Silence. Here's what's going to happen, Liam. You're going to stay away from my wife. You're going to stay away from my family. And if I see your face anywhere near my neighborhood, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation. Are you threatening me? I'm promising you. I hung up and immediately called my lawyer, David Chen. We'd gone to college together, and he'd handled the legal work when I opened my practice. Grant, how's Tara's podcast empire? Crumbling, hopefully. I need to discuss my options. Divorce? Among other things. We scheduled a meeting for the next day. Then I did something that felt both petty and necessary. I called Tara's 3 biggest sponsors. "Hi, this is Dr. Grant Ellis. I'm Tara Blake's husband, and I think we should discuss the medical accuracy of her recent content." By 5 o'clock, 2 sponsors had pulled their ads. The third wanted to reassess their relationship with Tara's brand. I was locking up the clinic when my phone rang. Tara, sobbing. "Grant, please. You're destroying everything I've worked for." "No," I said. "You destroyed it. I'm just making sure everyone knows. The girls are going to hear about this. At school, from their friends. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to humiliate their father for profit." I hung up and drove to my parents' house to pick up Emma and Sophie. They were in the backyard with my father, Frank, learning to throw punches at his old heavy bag. "Daddy!" Sophie ran to me, her dark hair flying. "Grandpa's teaching us to box." "Is he now?" I looked at my father, who shrugged. "Never too early to learn self-defense," he said, "especially for girls." We sat on the back porch while the girls played, and I told him everything. Frank listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. "Your mother went through something similar with her sister," he said finally. "Different circumstances, but the same betrayal. You know what she did?" "What?" "She got even. Not revenge, justice. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Revenge is about making yourself feel better. Justice is about making sure the truth comes out and the right people face consequences." He squeezed my shoulder. "You're a good man, Grant. Don't let this make you into something you're not." That evening, I sat the girls down for what might have been the hardest conversation of my life. "Are you and Mommy getting divorced?" Emma asked. She was the older one, more perceptive. "I don't know yet, sweetheart. We're having some problems." "Is it because of her podcast?" Sophie chimed in. "Jenny's mom said Mommy talks about private stuff." My heart broke a little more. Sometimes adults make mistakes, big ones, and sometimes those mistakes hurt the people they love. "Did Mommy make a mistake?" Emma's eyes were too wise for 10 years old. "Yeah, baby, she did." That night, after the girls were asleep, I sat in my home office and planned my next move. Tara was upstairs, probably doing damage control with Becca. I could hear their muffled voices through the ceiling. I opened my laptop and started typing. "My name is Grant Ellis, and my wife just destroyed our marriage on her podcast." The blog post went viral overnight. I'd published it on Medium under the title, "When Your Wife Makes You Famous for All the Wrong Reasons." It was a calm, factual account of discovering Tara's affair through her own public humiliation of me, complete with screenshots of the podcast comments and sponsor responses. I didn't mention Liam by name. I didn't have to. By morning, Real Talk Tara was trending on Twitter, and not in a good way. The internet had done what the internet does best. It had turned my personal tragedy into a morality play, with clearly defined heroes and villains. Tara was definitely the villain. I was getting dressed for work when she burst into our bedroom, laptop in hand, tears streaming down her face. "Grant, you have to take it down, please. They're destroying me." I looked at the screen. The comments on her latest podcast episode had exploded overnight. Her Instagram was flooded with angry messages. Someone had even created a parody account called Fake Talk with Tara. "Now you know how it feels," I said, knotting my tie. "This is different. You're a private person. I'm a public figure. This could end my career." "Good." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. "You don't mean that." "I absolutely mean that. You built your career on exploiting our marriage. Now you get to watch it burn down the same way." My phone buzzed. A text from David Chen. "Saw your blog post. Brilliant strategy. See you at 10. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Tara followed me. "What about the girls? What about our life?" I stopped at the top of the stairs and turned back to her. You should have thought about that before you decided Liam Torres was more important than your family. Her face went white. How do you... I know everything, Tara. The hotels, the lies, the way you've been planning your exit strategy while pretending to be the perfect wife and mother. The only thing I don't know is why. Grant, please, let me explain. Explain what? That you're a narcissist who got bored with real life and decided to trade it for internet fame and cheap thrills? I think I've got it figured out. I left her standing there and drove to my meeting with David. His office was in a glass tower downtown, the kind of place that charged by the minute and made you feel important just for being there. David was waiting with coffee and a stack of papers. First things first, he said. That blog post was smart. You've controlled the narrative from the beginning, but now we need to talk strategy. I want a divorce, full custody, and I want to make sure she can't use the girls as content for her podcast. All doable. Texas is a no-fault state, but adultery still matters for custody and property division. These screenshots are gold. He flipped through the printouts I'd given him. We can also pursue defamation claims for the podcast content. Defamation? She made false statements about your private performance that have damaged your reputation, in writing, to a public audience. It's textbook defamation. I thought about Mrs. Henderson and my other patients, all of whom had heard Tara's real talk about my supposed inadequacies. How much are we talking about? Depends on how far you want to push it. Her podcast generates decent revenue. We could go after all of it. Plus damages for emotional distress, loss of reputation, impact on your practice. Do it. David smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. I spent the rest of the morning seeing patients and pretending my life wasn't imploding. Around noon, Maria buzzed me. Dr. Ellis, there's a Liam Torres here to see you. He says it's urgent. I almost laughed. Send him back. Liam Torres was exactly what you'd expect from a CrossFit trainer who seduced married women, all muscles and hair gel, with the kind of aggressive confidence that probably worked on bored housewives. Grant, we need to talk man to man. We're not men, I said. You're a predator, and I'm your victim's husband. Have a seat. He sat across from my desk, trying to look intimidating. It might have worked if I hadn't spent the last 24 hours discovering reserves of anger I didn't know I possessed. Look, what happened with Tara? It just happened. We didn't plan it. Right. You just accidentally ended up in hotel rooms together, multiple times, taking pictures. His face flushed. She told you about the pictures? She didn't have to. I saw them. I leaned back in my chair. Tell me, Liam, what did you think would happen? That she'd leave me for you? That you'd play house with my daughters? It's not about you. Everything about this is about me. I stood up, and he actually flinched. You chose my wife. You chose my life to destroy. You chose to help her humiliate me in front of 50,000 strangers. So yeah, it's about me. Tara said you two were already having problems. Tara says a lot of things. Most of them are lies designed to make herself look better. I walked around the desk and sat on the edge, looking down at him. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay away from my wife. You're going to stay away from my family. And when the lawyers come asking questions, you're going to tell them the truth. What truth? That you pursued a married woman, that you knew she had children, and that you didn't care about the consequences. I smiled. Unless you'd prefer I post those pictures she sent you on your gym's Facebook page? He went pale. You wouldn't. Try me. After he left, I called Tara. She answered on the first ring. Grant, thank God. Liam said you two talked. We did. I told him to stay away from you. You can't control who I see. Actually, I can. It's called a restraining order, and my lawyer thinks we have an excellent case. Silence. Tara, you have a choice. You can end this affair, take down the podcast episodes that mention me, and we can try to work out a civilized divorce. Or you can keep playing games, and I'll destroy you in court. You're not this person, Grant. You're not vindictive. You're right, I wasn't. But you've taught me so much about myself these past few days. I'm actually grateful. That afternoon, Becca Lane showed up at my office. Tara's best friend and co-host was a petite blonde with the kind of sharp features that suggested a sharp mind behind them. Dr. Ellis, I'm Becca Lane. I think we should talk. About what? About ending this before it gets worse. I showed her into my office and closed the door. I'm listening. Tara made a mistake. A big one. But she's not a bad person, and she doesn't deserve to have her life destroyed over it. Interesting perspective. What about my life? You're a successful professional with a solid reputation. You'll recover from this. But Tara's career is built on her public image. If you keep pushing, you'll destroy everything she's worked for. I studied her face. Becca had always struck me as the smarter of the two, the one who actually understood how the podcast business worked. What are you proposing? Tara takes down the episodes. She issues a public apology. She gives you an uncontested divorce with whatever custody arrangement you want. In exchange, you drop the defamation suit and stop talking to the media. And Liam? That's over. It was just a fling that got out of hand. I pretended to consider it. What's in it for you, Becca? I want to save the show. Tara's my business partner. Right. And if her career crashes, yours goes with it. Her smile was razor thin. We all have our motivations. Here's my counteroffer, I said. Tara can do whatever she wants with her career. But she's going to face the consequences of her choices just like everyone else. You're making a mistake, Dr. Ellis. Tara has a platform. She has influence. If you push her into a corner, she might push back in ways you don't expect. Is that a threat? It's a warning. After she left, I sat in my office thinking about the conversation. Something about Becca's demeanor bothered me, but I couldn't put my finger on what. That evening, I picked up the girls from school and took them to my parents' house. Tara had called the school hysterical, claiming I was kidnapping them. The principal, Mrs. Rodriguez, had calmly explained that taking your own children to their grandparents' house didn't constitute kidnapping. Daddy, Emma said as we sat around my parents' dinner table, why is Mommy so upset? She's going through a hard time, sweetheart. Is it because people are being mean to her on the internet? I looked at my father, who nodded encouragingly. Some people are being mean, yes. But sometimes when we make bad choices, other people get angry about it. What bad choice did Mommy make? Sophie asked. She hurt Daddy's feelings very badly, and she did it in front of a lot of people. That wasn't nice, Emma said solemnly. No, baby, it wasn't. That night, after the girls were asleep, I sat on my parents' back porch with my father and told him about my conversations with Liam and Becca. You're handling this well, he said. Better than I would have at your age. I don't feel like I'm handling it well. I feel like I'm drowning. That's normal. But you're not drowning, son. You're swimming. There's a difference. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the crickets and the distant hum of traffic. Dad, what would you do? In my position? He was quiet for a long time. I'd make sure my daughters knew the truth. I'd make sure the people who hurt my family faced consequences. And I'd make sure I could look at myself in the mirror when it was all over. In that order? In that order. The defamation lawsuit hit Tara like a freight train. David had filed it on a Friday afternoon, timing it perfectly for maximum weekend media coverage. By Monday morning, every major blog and podcast in the relationship advice space was covering the story of the wife who'd been sued by her own husband for publicly humiliating him. I was seeing my first patient of the day when Maria buzzed me again. Dr. Ellis, there's a reporter from the Dallas Morning News on line 2, and Channel 8 wants to schedule an interview. Tell them I'm not commenting at this time. But the media attention was having exactly the effect I'd hoped for. Tara's remaining sponsors were fleeing faster than rats from a sinking ship. Her podcast downloads had plummeted. Even her social media followers were abandoning her in droves. I was reviewing patient files when my phone rang. Tara, of course. Grant, you have to stop this, please. I'll do anything. Anything? Yes, anything. Full custody of the girls, the house, half your podcast revenue for the past 2 years, and a public apology admitting you lied about our marriage. Silence. Tara? I can't give you full custody. They're my daughters too. You should have thought about that before you decided to use our marriage as content. I hung up and immediately got another call. This time it was Becca. Dr. Ellis, we need to meet. Tonight. Why? Because I have information you need to hear. About Tara, about the podcast, about things you don't know. Something in her voice made me pay attention. What kind of things? Not over the phone. Can you meet me at Murphy's Pub on Elm Street? 8 o'clock? Murphy's was a dive bar in downtown Dallas, the kind of place where nobody would recognize either of us. I agreed to meet her there. The rest of the day dragged by. Patients came and went, but my mind was elsewhere. What could Becca possibly tell me that would change anything? Tara had cheated, humiliated me publicly, and was now facing the consequences. What else was there to know? Murphy's was exactly what I'd expected: dim lighting, sticky floors, and the kind of clientele that minded their own business. Becca was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a glass of wine and a manila folder. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "What's this about, Becca?" She slid the folder across the table. "Open it." Inside were bank statements, email printouts, and what looked like legal documents. I flipped through them, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. "These are podcast revenue reports," I said. "Keep reading." The numbers didn't make sense at first. Then I saw it. Payments to Becca Lane Media LLC that were far larger than what a co-host should be receiving. "You own the podcast," I said. "I own everything. The brand, the social media accounts, the sponsorship deals. Tara's just the face." "Why are you telling me this?" Becca took a long sip of wine. "Because I'm tired of cleaning up her messes." "What messes?" The affair with Liam wasn't her first. There was a personal trainer in Austin 2 years ago, a yoga instructor last summer, a married father from the girls' school last month. What? Tara has a pattern, Grant. She gets bored, she finds someone exciting, she has an affair, and then she uses the drama as content for the show. The whole "my husband is inadequate" storyline? We've used it 3 times with different variations. I stared at the documents, trying to process what she was telling me. You knew she was cheating, and you helped her turn it into entertainment. I helped her turn it into money. Do you know how much revenue that podcast generates? We're talking 7 figures annually. And you get the majority of it. I do the work. Tara just shows up and talks. I leaned back in the booth, studying her face. Why are you really telling me this, Becca? Because your lawsuit is going to destroy everything I've built, and because Tara is planning to throw me under the bus to save herself. How? She's going to claim I manipulated her into the affair storylines, that I pressured her to humiliate you for content, that I'm the real villain here. Aren't you? Becca's smile was cold. We're all villains here, Grant. The question is which one of us is going to win. She pulled out another document. This is a settlement offer. I'll give you everything you want in the divorce: custody, assets, alimony. In exchange, you drop the defamation suit and sign a non-disclosure agreement. What about Tara? What about her? She made her choices. Now she gets to live with the consequences. I looked at the settlement offer. It was generous. More than generous. It would give me everything I'd asked for and more. There's one more thing, Becca said. Something you should know about the night you discovered the affair. What about it? Tara didn't leave her phone unlocked by accident. I told her to do it. The room seemed to tilt sideways. What? I knew you'd check it eventually. I wanted you to find the messages with Liam. I wanted you to get angry enough to do something dramatic. Why? because I needed a way out of my partnership with Tara, and I needed someone else to be the bad guy. Your blog post, the lawsuit, the media attention, it's all giving me the perfect excuse to rebrand and start over without her. I stood up so fast, I knocked over my beer. You manipulated all of this. You destroyed my marriage for your business plan. I didn't destroy your marriage, Grant. It was already broken. I just helped you see it clearly. You're insane. I'm practical, and I'm offering you a way to win. Take the settlement, get your daughters, move on with your life, or keep fighting and risk losing everything in a prolonged legal battle that will hurt your children more than anyone else. I left the folder on the table and walked out. The drive home was a blur of rage and disbelief. Everything I thought I knew about the past week had been a lie. Tara hadn't just betrayed me. She'd been manipulated into betraying me by someone I'd considered a friend. But that didn't excuse her choices. She'd still cheated. She'd still humiliated me. She'd still chosen her career over our family. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a long time thinking. Then I called David Chen. Grant, it's late. Is everything okay? I need to ask you something. Hypothetically, if someone manipulated my wife into having an affair for business purposes, would that change our legal strategy? Manipulated how? I told him about my conversation with Becca. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Grant, this changes everything. If we can prove Becca orchestrated this for financial gain, we're not just talking about a divorce case anymore. We're talking about fraud, conspiracy, maybe even extortion. What do you need? Evidence, documents, recordings, anything that proves Becca planned this. I think I know how to get it. The next morning, I called Becca and told her I wanted to accept the settlement offer. We agreed to meet at her office that afternoon to sign the papers. What she didn't know was that I'd be wearing a wire. Becca's office was in a trendy co-working space in Deep Ellum, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. She'd decorated her corner suite with motivational posters and awards from various podcasting organizations, the perfect backdrop for someone who'd built her career on exploiting other people's misery. Grant, I'm so glad you decided to be reasonable about this, she said, gesturing for me to sit across from her glass desk. The recording device David had given me was smaller than a pack of gum, tucked into my jacket pocket with the microphone clipped to my collar like a pen. I'd practiced the conversation in my car, knowing I'd only get one chance to get her to confess. I've been thinking about what you said, I replied, about Tara being manipulated. I want to understand exactly how this worked. Becca's eyes lit up. She was proud of her scheme and eager to share the details with someone who could appreciate her cleverness. It started about 6 months ago, she said, pulling out a thick file. Our download numbers were plateauing. The relationship advice market is saturated, and we needed a way to stand out. So you decided to manufacture drama. I decided to monetize drama that was already there. Tara was restless, bored with domestic life. She'd been flirting with trainers and yoga instructors for months. All I did was encourage her to take it to the next level. How? I introduced her to Liam, set up the meeting, suggested she try his gym, even paid for her membership. Then I helped orchestrate their interactions, suggesting times when she should work out, topics she should bring up in conversation. I felt sick. You pimped out my wife for content. I gave her permission to do what she already wanted to do, and I made sure we could profit from it. Becca opened the file and showed me a detailed timeline. Every affair, every fight, every dramatic moment was planned and scheduled around our recording calendar. The podcast episodes about male inadequacy, written in advance. We knew you'd eventually discover the affair, and we needed content ready to capitalize on the fallout. She smiled. Your reaction was even better than we'd hoped. The blog post, the lawsuit, the media attention, it's been incredible for our brand awareness. Until the sponsors started pulling out? A temporary setback. Controversy sells, Grant. In 6 months, this will all be forgotten, and we'll have a dozen new sponsors begging to work with us. What about Tara? What happens to her in your master plan? Becca shrugged. Tara's replaceable. She's got the looks and the voice, but she's not the brains behind the operation. I can find another pretty face to sit behind the microphone. And you're willing to destroy her life to do it. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to protect my investment. Her expression hardened. Do you know how much money I've put into building this brand? How many hours I've spent cleaning up Tara's mistakes and covering for her incompetence? So this is about money. This is about justice. Tara's been coasting on my work for 3 years, taking credit for my ideas, making more money than she deserves. The affair storyline was supposed to be her final arc, a dramatic exit that would let me rebrand and start fresh. With her taking all the blame. With her taking responsibility for her choices. I didn't force her to cheat, Grant. I just gave her the opportunity and the encouragement. I leaned forward. And you made sure I'd find out in the most humiliating way possible. I made sure the truth would come out in a way that would generate maximum engagement. Your pain is unfortunate, but it's also incredibly valuable from a content perspective. What about my daughters? What about the impact on them? For the first time, Becca looked uncomfortable. Children are resilient. They'll adapt. You're a sociopath. I'm a businesswoman. There's a difference. She slid the settlement papers across the desk. Now, are you going to sign these, or do I need to find another way to solve my Tara problem? What other way? Well, affairs aren't the only kind of scandal that can destroy someone's reputation. There are financial irregularities, substance abuse issues, mental health crises. I'm very creative when I need to be. I stared at her, finally understanding the full scope of what I was dealing with. Becca wasn't just manipulative, she was dangerous. I need some time to think about this, I said, standing up. Don't take too long. My offer expires at the end of the week. I left her office and drove straight to David's law firm. He was waiting with a digital audio technician who helped us review the recording. This is gold, David said, after we'd listened to the entire conversation. She's confessed to fraud, conspiracy, and several other felonies. We can destroy her. What about Tara? Tara's a victim here too, legally speaking. If we can prove she was manipulated into the affair as part of a business scheme, it completely changes the divorce proceedings. I don't know if I can forgive her, I said. Even if she was manipulated, she still made the choice to cheat. That's not a legal question, Grant. That's a personal one. I spent the rest of the afternoon thinking about forgiveness, about justice, about what was best for my daughters. By evening, I'd made my decision. I called Tara and asked her to meet me at the house. She arrived 20 minutes later, looking haggard and defeated. The confident podcast host was gone, replaced by a scared woman who'd lost control of her life. Grant, I'm so sorry, she said before I could speak. I know I've destroyed everything, but please don't take the girls away from me. Sit down, Tara. We need to talk. I told her everything. About Becca's manipulation, about the business plan, about how their entire friendship had been built on exploitation. Tara listened in stunned silence, occasionally shaking her head or making small sounds of disbelief. She planned all of this? Tara whispered when I finished. All of it. The affair, the podcast content, even my discovery of the messages. You were just a pawn in her game. But I still cheated. I still chose to hurt you and the girls. Yes, you did. And we'll have to deal with that. But you were manipulated by someone you trusted, and that matters. Tara started crying. Not the dramatic sobs of someone performing grief, but the quiet tears of genuine remorse. What happens now? She asked. Now we stop letting Becca control our lives. We take back our story. The next morning, David filed criminal charges against Becca Lane for fraud, conspiracy, and extortion. We also filed a civil suit on behalf of both Tara and myself, seeking damages for the destruction of our marriage and the harm to our family. But I wasn't done yet. I'd learned something about myself over the past week I was capable of playing hardball when my family was threatened, and Becca Lane was about to discover just how hard I could play. I called a press conference for that afternoon. The media turnout was impressive: local news stations, podcast industry blogs, even a few national outlets that had been following the story. I stood behind a podium in David's conference room, looking out at a sea of cameras and reporters. "My name is Grant Ellis," I began. "A week ago, my wife publicly humiliated me on her podcast, claiming I was inadequate as a husband and a man. Today, I'm here to tell you the real story." I laid out everything: Becca's manipulation, the manufactured affairs, the business plan that treated my family's destruction as a marketing opportunity. I played excerpts from the recording, watching as reporters frantically took notes. "My wife made terrible choices," I continued, "but she was manipulated by someone she trusted, someone who saw our marriage as nothing more than content to be exploited for profit." The questions came fast and furious after that. How long had the manipulation been going on? Were there other victims? What kind of damages were we seeking? I answered them all, calmly and thoroughly. By the time I finished, Becca Lane's reputation was in ruins. The story exploded across social media within hours. Sir Becca Lane and Tronic podcast scandal were trending on Twitter. Her co-working space evicted her. Her other clients dropped her. Even Liam Torres issued a statement claiming he'd been manipulated into participating in an unethical business scheme. But the best part came that evening, when Becca called me directly. "You've destroyed me," she said without preamble. "I've exposed you," I replied. "There's a difference. This isn't over, Grant. I'll find a way to—" "No, Becca. This is over. You're done. And if you come anywhere near my family again, I'll make sure you spend the next decade in prison." I hung up and blocked her number. 3 months later, Tara and I were sitting in a marriage counselor's office, trying to rebuild what Becca had helped destroy. It wasn't easy. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal overnight. But we were trying, for ourselves and for our daughters. The criminal case against Becca was proceeding slowly through the courts. She'd been arrested, released on bail, and was facing multiple felony charges. The civil suit was more promising. Her assets had been frozen, and David was confident we'd recover substantial damages. More importantly, the podcast industry had taken notice. New regulations were being discussed about the ethics of using personal relationships as content. Several other victims of similar schemes had come forward, and a class action lawsuit was being organized. "Do you think we'll make it?" Tara asked as we left the counselor's office one Thursday afternoon. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I think we owe it to the girls to try." She nodded, taking my hand as we walked to our cars. "Grant, thank you for fighting for us, for not just walking away. Thank you for being worth fighting for." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Real life doesn't work that way. But it was a beginning, a chance to rebuild our marriage on a foundation of truth instead of lies, of genuine intimacy instead of manufactured drama. As for Becca Lane, she pled guilty to fraud charges 6 months later and was sentenced to 3 years in prison.